Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is From Hell. Now, From Hell is a graphic novel written by Alan Moore and illustrated by Eddie Campbell. Now, Alan Moore, of course, has written graphic novels like Watchmen, V for Vendetta, and he also wrote the Batman graphic novel The Killing Joke. Now, From Hell was originally published in serialized form in a comic book series called Taboo, and I believe those were published between the years 1989 to 1992. But then Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell took this and made it its own series, and they published it in 10 volumes, which were all published between the years 1991 to 1996, I believe. And then in 1999 or 2000, all those volumes were all published into one graphic novel. Now, From Hell is a fictional story about the Jack the Ripper killings, which took place in London in 1888, and Alan Moore took a lot of inspiration for this book from a 1977 book called Jack the Ripper: The Final Solution, written by Stephen Knight. Now, Stephen Knight's theory on Jack the Ripper is, what if the Jack the Ripper killings were actually a conspiracy to conceal the identity of the illegitimate child of Prince Albert Victor? Now, I believe a lot of Knight's theories have been kind of discredited by a lot of historians now, and Alan Moore even admits that, but really this book is, once again, it's really more of a fictional story that's loosely based on the Jack the Ripper killings. So, in the beginning of this book, Prince Albert Victor ends up visiting this area in London under an assumed name, and he meets this woman who works at this candy shop, and the two of them fall in love and end up getting married and having a child. And when the Queen finds out about this, the Queen has them forcibly separated and actually has this woman put in an insane asylum. So in the book, there's a group of prostitutes who are friends of this woman, and now they're blackmailing this friend of Prince Albert's who knows about all this, and they're threatening to reveal the identity of this child that Prince Albert and their friend had. And when the Queen finds out about all this, she ends up hiring this physician named William Gull to go after these prostitutes and kill them. And then when the police find the bodies of some of them, the media gets wind of this, and they call this the Jack the Ripper killings. And, so that's really the whole plot of the book. It's basically based on the theory that what if the Jack the Ripper killings were actually a conspiracy to cover up the identity of the illegitimate child of Prince Albert Victor. Now, I thought From Hell was a very interesting book, and I really liked how this book is actually very deep and very philosophically driven, which is something that I really liked. And I also liked how the book was more or less a conspiracy thriller, because you realize that these Jack the Ripper killings are actually a conspiracy. I really thought that was very interesting, and in the book you realize that the police actually know who Jack the Ripper is, but they're being paid to keep quiet. I thought it was very interesting. Now, the book is very much a character study on William Gull, who was actually a real person, and this isn't the first story about Jack the Ripper to make the claims that Gull was Jack the Ripper, because in reality Jack the Ripper was never actually caught, so nobody knows for sure who Jack the Ripper really was, but this isn't the first story to make the claim that Gull was Jack the Ripper. And in the book, it really does get into Gull's psyche, and it also shows you a lot of Gull's philosophical views, and once again, it's a very philosophically driven book. Like, a lot of the book actually deals with the concept of time, and what if time is actually a human illusion. And there's a scene early on in this book where Gull is talking to this person, and this person tells him about a theory about what if time as we know it is just an illusion, and what if all times essentially coexist. So it gets into a lot of really interesting ideas about the idea of time and the passage of time, and and how time is really non-linear. And the book does have kind of an element of the supernatural, because there's certain points in this book where Gull actually gets glimpses into the future. Like, in the book, there's a scene where Gull is taking one of the prostitutes that he's about to murder down this alley, and then he looks in this window and sees a man in the window, and the man sees him, but this man is in his living room, and in the background is a television, meaning that this is a modern-day living room, but this book is set in 1888, and televisions, of course, weren't invented yet, so basically this is Gull getting a glimpse into the future, and you get more scenes like this later on. Like, there's another scene in this book where, after he kills another prostitute, all of a sudden he has a vision where he's in a modern-day office, and essentially he keeps getting these glimpses into the future. But with these glimpses into the future that Gull has, you do get kind of a commentary on the way we live now compared to how we lived back during the time that this book takes place. Another example of kind of the element of the supernatural that's in this book is there's a scene in the book where the inspector who's looking for Jack the Ripper meets these people, and they give him a copy of this book written by a guy who claimed to have seen into the future, and in the book it predicts things like the Cold War and World War II, all of which haven't happened yet in 1888, so that's another example of, the future and, the concept of time that's presented in this book. And another thing I love about this book is I love how character-driven this book was. Because this book focuses on almost all its characters. Even though the book does primarily focus on William Gull, it gets into the personal lives of these prostitutes that Gull is going after, and, it really is a very character-driven book, which is something that I really liked, because I'm a big character person. It's one of the reasons why Stephen King is one of my favorite writers, is because authors like Stephen King, he really does get into the characters a lot, and so does Alan Moore. Alan Moore, pretty much everything I've read from Alan Moore so far, there hasn't been a two-dimensional character in anything I've read from him so far. Alan Moore, he's really good with characterization, and that's something I really loved with this book, is how character-driven it was. And one thing that I really liked about this book is I liked how it really focused on this inspector who's looking for Jack the Ripper, and obviously he doesn't know yet about this whole conspiracy that's going on, and he doesn't know yet who Jack the Ripper really is, but the book really does get into the personal life of this inspector, whose name is Frederick Aberline. I think I'm saying his name right, and, he was actually the real inspector who in real life was working on the Jack the Ripper case at the time all this went on. And I also thought it was really cool how a lot of the characters in this book are actual historical figures, like Joseph Merrick, who most people would know as the Elephant Man, actually shows up in a few scenes in this book as one of the characters, which I thought was kind of cool. I also really liked Eddie Campbell's artwork in this book. I don't know, there's just something about the artwork I really dug. The way it's drawn, it's almost drawn like pencil sketches, but I really liked it, though. I thought it was actually really cool, but here's an example of some of the artwork in the book, right here. But overall, I could definitely recommend From Hell. I thought it was a very interesting book, and if you're a history buff, I think you would definitely like this book, even if you don't actually agree with the theories that are presented in this book. Once again, I just look at it as a fictional story that's just loosely based on the Jack the Ripper killings, so if you look at it as more historical fiction, I think you would enjoy it more as opposed to if you looked at it as some kind of biography or something. But it's a very interesting book, and I think if you are a history buff or somebody who's really interested in history, I think you would definitely dig it. Although I can see why some of the supernatural aspects in the book, or the stuff dealing with the concept of time, could be a little off-putting to some people. One thing that I do want to mention, though, is I personally would only recommend this book for people above 17 and 18 because this book is actually very graphic sexually. Like, there's a lot of scenes where characters are having sex and you see penetration, and there's a scene where, like, some woman's like jerking off this guy, so it is very sexually graphic, so I would not recommend this for people under 17 or 18. Now, From Hell was also made into a movie in 2001, and the movie had Johnny Depp in it. Now, I haven't seen the movie in years, but from what I remember of the movie, I remember the movie changed quite a bit from the book. Like, I know the movie, like, left out all the stuff about, the concept of time in it and all the somewhat supernatural elements from the book. I remember it not being a bad movie, but I do remember the movie changing quite a bit from the book. But yeah, that's my review on From Hell by Alan Moore and illustrated by Eddie Campbell, and bye.